Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This episode, we'll be talking, new leadership over there at USSF, allegedly. Cleopatra, blue checks, CCL, title races, Wrexham, and so much more. But first, joining me as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Monday, April 24th in the year 2023? What a world we live in.
I am doing well. Excited to be here on a day with some big U.S. Soccer Federation news, as you mentioned.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff going on. Hey, Mosse, a couple things before we get into what we watched, because it's referencing back for a couple of pods ago. I put out on Twitter a poll relative to something that we had talked about, and I can't remember what your take was. Can you say you read a book if you only listened to it on audio? Because I only listen to books now on audio. I listen to them at I'll be honest, double speed. I don't do the traditional reading anymore. So when I'm talking to you or anybody else, even on the pod when we talk about stuff that we've read or seen or something like that, am I allowed to say that I read that book?
Yes.
Okay. The yeses have it, and if it happened on Twitter, then you know that this is reality, right? So yeses have it at almost 60%, 58.4%. The no's at 41.6%. Almost 4,000 people voted. So this was back and forth. I got librarians and professors and all sorts of people adamant about it. And then, you get called ageist if you possibly don't believe this, or ableist. Sorry, I get my ists all confused. Anyway, I think it's an interesting way to look at things, because obviously in the traditional and the definition sense, you didn't read the book. But a lot of people's point was, as long as you are absorbing the information, but then you kind of would have to say, hey, I absorbed this book the other day, which sounds kind of stupid anyway. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing. You got something to say on it?
I think I read a book works as an umbrella term for any consumption of the book's information.
Can you say that you talked to somebody if you texted with them?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. We live in interesting times. Okay. This gets, this was all done on Twitter. By the way, Mosse, do you think that I should, or you or anybody else out there should pay for this blue check?
Honestly, as I've told you, I'm not that into Twitter.
I love Twitter.
I must be a disappointing follow because I tweet like once in a blue moon. I merely respond to questions people ask me who listen to the pod. So I don't know what this whole controversy is about. To be honest, I'm only vaguely familiar with.
It's not that big a controversy. I mean, you do it, don't do it. I love Twitter, and so it's a service that I use, and I find benefit to it. It's not perfect like anything else. So I would pay for Twitter, I think, if it was just all subscription. And this is a case where you just get that blue check, which is something that I had for many, many years, and it went away for pretty much everybody except for elites of the elites, or people that actually pay for it. I think I'm gonna pay for it. It's a good service.
I watch Bill Maher's show every week on HBO, and he did mention this past Friday that Elon Musk will be a guest on the next.
Ooh, interesting. I mean, the dude says and does interesting things with his billions and billions of dollars out there. Yeah, I think if he provides a service that I find of value, I'm going to pay for it. And I think if you pay for it, you get you can do longer video. You have the edit function to be able to do things. So you have to make it worth people's while ultimately. But yeah, I think I'm gonna do it. You read anything or watch anything, my friend?
Well, we talked about this on our last pod. The Real Madrid-Barcelona rivalry had taken a weird turn as people started relitigating the Spanish Civil War and arguing about which club is the regime's team. And that has sent me down a Spanish Civil War rabbit hole. I watched an excellent documentary on Netflix called The Two Catalonias, which is about the Catalan campaign for independence and this very controversial referendum in 2017. And I have ordered on Amazon this book, Spain in Our Hearts, which is about Americans who volunteered to fight the Spanish Civil War. The book arrived late last night. I'm excited to start reading it this week, so that's going to be my next book.
So where do you fall now on the Catalan debate? Do you think that it should be its own sovereign, independent nation?
I don't know enough about it to have a strong opinion.
Look at you.
But
Come on.
I was surprised to find that there is this silent majority in Catalonia that was very much against independence. I sort of had this image that every single person walking around that region believes in that, and actually they showed in the documentary massive rallies of people waving Spanish flags in the streets of Barcelona and who are strongly against it.
Interesting. All right, well, let's see. What did I see? A couple of things. I'm on my old movie kick, so that continues on. And now I'm on a Elizabeth Taylor kick. So I watched from 1958, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Awesome Tennessee Williams play. And this is obviously the film version of starring Paul Newman and Elizabeth Taylor. And by the way, Burl Ives, who was incredible in this. And then the 1963 Cleopatra film, a classic, an epic, starring Elizabeth Taylor and Rex Harrison and Richard Burton. Both of them hold up. They're incredible filmmaking and incredible performances, and recommend them both. And then much more modern. Mosse, do you have this effect? Maybe some of our viewers and listeners out there have it. That whole pandemic thing that we went through. Obviously, a lot of people had times where they had to isolate and they were alone, and so you pulled up stuff that you could watch. And there's stuff that I watched that I don't remember watching. And this is the case with Nicole Kidman in a movie called Destroyer, a 2018 film that came out. It's kind of an independent film. I watched it during the pandemic, and I pulled it up the other day, and only about halfway through did I realize that I had watched it. And so some of that pandemic stuff is just such a crazy, crazy blur. It's still an incredible performance and a really interesting and weird type of whodunit about this cop who had previously been undercover, but I do recommend it. It's called Destroyer, and it came out, I think, in 2018. And this is not the only movie that I've had this effect happen, where I pull it up and say, wait a second, I saw this, but it was just kind of fast food-ish type of viewing that was happening during that pandemic. Anything else, my friend?
That's it.
All right, ready? Are you ready to light this candle? Let me enunciate that. Are you ready to light this candle?
Let's do it.
All right, where should we start? Well, there's only one place to start, right? Big news.
We've spent the last 2 months talking about these U.S. Soccer Federation vacancies. A big one is about to be filled. There are widespread reports that U.S. Soccer is set to hire Matt Crocker as the new sporting director. We're taping this on a Monday. They've announced a press conference tomorrow, in which presumably they're going to reveal him as the new sporting director. He comes from Southampton, where he was director of football operations. Previous to that, he worked for the FA, overseeing England's youth teams during a period of great success for England at youth level, in which they pumped out lots of good players and won the under-17 and under-20 World Cups. I must confess, I had never heard of this guy until the last couple days, but at least on paper, based on his resume, he seems to be an intriguing choice.
Yeah, credit should go also to The Athletic that broke this story, and this is a big story within our soccer world, and maybe it has tentacles outside of it to a certain extent, because I think people recognize that the United States Soccer Federation is in this moment of change. Some would call it turmoil. I don't necessarily think it is. I just think it's a moment of change, and the pressures and the frustration and the exasperation certainly coming from outside about these roles not being filled, and therefore us kind of being in stasis. I don't think that there is a whole lot of knowledge when it comes to the American side of this of Mr. Crocker, but as far as a resume goes, I think he checks some boxes here or there with both work in men's and women's. Because keep in mind, this is the position for sporting director that Ernie Stewart vacated. And this oversees all of that competitive side of national teams, men's and women's, both sides. So he would be coming in and being, for example, the boss of Kate Margraf. And then we still don't know yet whether the Brian McBride role is going to be filled as a GM specifically to the men's team. But if there was a person that came in that position, then I would assume he would also be the boss of that person. But I think his first order of business when he comes in is to sort out the men's side and get a coach in as soon as possible. Again, if this is all true, and we're going off of good reporting, and where there is smoke, there is fire. I do think that the justification for this hire is going to be expected, maybe more so than it has been in the past, given the history and how did this all come about, who else was interviewed, what was the interview process, why was this individual ahead of the rest. Look, I just want a warm body at this point, and if this is the body that they're going with, great. I wish him all the luck in the world. I want him to be successful. I want him to lead us, hopefully, on and off the field to positive and successful things, not the least of which is, I suppose he would be in before the Women's World Cup and then into 2026. So that there is actual movement, that there is an actual human being, that's great. I look forward to U.S. Soccer explaining how the process, because this is the world that they have created, where we need to know everything and how and why this was actually done. And I don't know if that's something we shouldn't know, but I think that it deserves an explanation as to how they came to this decision, because this is an important position of leadership with power and with influence at a time when we cannot afford to get this wrong.
Now, in the wake of the Berhalter Reina Michigas, there's been this growing sentiment that U.S. Soccer needed to hire a quote-unquote outsider. And lots of people, including recent guest of this podcast, Taylor Twellman, are praising this appointment for that reason. You have kind of bristled at those suggestions. So does the fact that this guy is a quote-unquote outsider in any way enhance his candidacy to you or diminish it, or what do you make of it?
Oh, I think it enhances the image of USSF. And keep in mind, this might not have been their, if this is the choice, this may not have been their first choice. There may have been others. We already heard rumors that there were those that turned this position down and just said, for whatever reason, it could be money, it could be the headache, it could be a perception, whether it's the reality or not, of a problematic organization that's going to take a lot to fix and not a job that somebody wanted to do. But absolutely, Mosse. I think that whether it's the reality or the perception, I think that the United States Soccer Federation is and has been incredibly sensitive to the outside critique and criticism and accusations of, whether it's the nepotism or the cronyism or the systemic old boy, old girl network that exists. And so, maybe in a certain sense that can hurt somebody that is of that community. But this is what has been created. And so this is the reality of what's going on. You can't tell me that there is not somebody who has been around American soccer, who has a history, that has a knowledge and has success within American soccer that isn't available and couldn't do this job. Maybe that person was interviewed. Who knows? Maybe that person doesn't want to do it. So there are quality candidates out there that are quote unquote American, not even quote unquote. They are American relative to Crocker. But again, all of the criticism that came and the worry that it was just going to be another one of the people that we know. This is on the surface going outside of that. And maybe that's good. But don't think for a second that he or anybody else doesn't come with their own set of baggage and their own set of history and their own set of biases when it comes to the things that they do. And that's normal because last I checked, he is a human being. And so all of us humans are going to come with that. But, I don't care where the person ultimately is from. I want them to do a good job. I want them to be able to set a course that is achievable, that is to a certain extent visionary, and that gets us to a better place. And I don't know how he is going to approach it, but I would think he would come in, and I would think that he would immerse himself in the good, bad, and the ugly that has existed for now decades, because there is a lot of good, and you certainly don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater if you're smart. And I will be interested if and when that assessment of his happens, what he comes to find out in terms of what that good is, what that bad is, and what that ugly is. And maybe that set of fresh eyes will help correct some of the mistakes and improve some of the successes that we have already had, but ultimately get us to a better place, because 2026 is right around the corner. And maximizing it on and off the field has to be a priority for this federation, and they need individuals, men and women, that are quality, regardless of where they come from, that understand, take a pride in what they're doing, have a respect for the positions of leadership that they are in, and ultimately do their job.
Now, I mentioned he came from Southampton. Interestingly enough, that is the club that recently tried to hire Jesse Marsch, but Jesse turned down the job. Lots of people are connecting those dots, including another recent guest of this podcast, Doug McIntyre. Mm-hmm. He tweeted that this appointment makes Marsch now the odds-on favorite to be the next U.S. coach. Is that how you see it?
Again, it goes back to, biases that people come with and baggage that people come with. And, if he's coming in, all already hot and bothered and not bothered, but excited about the potential of Jesse Marsch, which obviously in previous positions he has had an affinity for, then that certainly puts Jesse in a better position. And again, this isn't to say that he's not going to, I would hope, do his due diligence if and when he is hiring somebody, and make sure that he has a good collection of candidates. But if that's somebody that he really likes, and in this position he sees is the best candidate, it's going to come from a position of him understanding and having a knowledge and already showing a flirtation in the past with him. So yeah, I think Jesse was always going to be a part of that conversation no matter what. But again, in life, you have to have connections, you have to have relationships, you have to have contacts, and when you have them, utilizing them and maximizing them, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that.
If Matt Crocker had any sense of humor, he would appoint one of his relatives as the next manager. But, you do hear whenever an American goes to work abroad, you do hear that they need to understand the soccer culture of that country. When it works the other way, to what degree does Matt Crocker now need to immerse himself in American soccer culture and really understand what that is? How would you define American soccer culture, I guess, is where we should start out.
I would define it as incredibly complex and incredibly, at times, frustrating probably, but also that's not an excuse for not understanding it, and that's certainly not an excuse for ignoring it. Not that he or anybody would do that. But again, I think inherent in this position and this job is a recognition that you are going to do the things, if you don't have that intrinsic knowledge and that history within the game, of immersing yourself in it and understanding, because there's no way you can understand the challenges that you have unless you have some nuance, unless you have some depth, unless you have some understanding, and that can be gotten. This is, yes, it's complex, but again, immersing yourself in the country and culture that you are working for and that you are working to improve, I think that's a no-brainer. I don't think that's crazy to expect. And I would say, from an internal perspective, your USSF, insist that somebody do that. And I think, because I don't think, one, you're not doing your job, and two, I think you're not giving yourself every opportunity to do the best job that you possibly can if you don't understand it. And again, a new set of eyes may look at it and say, well, in the past, okay, so now I understand this situation relative to American soccer, and this, whether it's our youth systems or our college system or all that. And in the past, this was the answer to this question that we were asking. I'm going to have a different answer because of all of the history that I have, and maybe a seed that was planted long ago in his experience in Europe, in his experience growing up and his experience in the men's and women's game brings something new in terms of looking at, situations that have long been there and challenges that have long been there. At least that's the hope that you get. And ultimately, this is a national team. Okay, this isn't a club team. This is a national team, and a national team obviously represents a nation. So you are now a representative of the United States of America. And again, in the same way that I don't want a mercenary running around on the field representing my country, I don't want someone working for that team that represents my country that is in there simply in a mercenary capacity. And so after you get paid and after all the hoopla, you certainly, I would hope, would feel something for the good that you are doing through soccer for what I feel is the greatest country in the world. And I hope that Mr. Crocker, or anybody who is working there, is able to tap into that pride. Because without it, then it's just another job. And this is not just another job.
And, of course, they still have to hire a men's general manager, correct?
Well, I mean, yes, in that there is that empty position. And there was the thought that possibly they would just split them off. And so Crocker would be the head of the men's side. But that it's been very clear that he is taking Ernie Stewart's position and is in charge of all of it. And look, given his background, especially when it comes to the women's game, he kind of, I think it checks some boxes there, and it lends itself to a much more expansive type of overseeing of all of these national teams and all of these programs on both sides. But then it still remains to be seen, does that Brian McBride position of GM specifically for the men's team, is it filled, or does it need to be filled going forward? I mean, because then you're adding another layer and somebody else's voice into who is ultimately picking that coach. So this is only that first step. There might be that second step, which is the GM, and then that third step, which may be the most important one from an outside perspective, of naming the coach. But at least this is movement. At least this is forward movement. And if this ends up being true, I wish him all the luck in the world. I can't wait to meet him and kind of hear how he thinks about the position, what his vision is, and again, ask him what has been done that has been good and what has been done that has been bad. And maybe he's going to take some time to try to figure that out. But time's a ticking, man. You got to hit the ground running. And if I were him and I already know that I have this job, I would have already been immersed just to get the job, and be even more so now going forward, so that you can hit that ground running immediately when the official announcement happens. And behind the scenes, you're probably already doing it.
If nothing else, he's a good-looking man, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, he looks good. I mean, having good-looking people around is a good thing, right? Yep. All right, so big news, and hopefully good and positive news going forward for this federation that has been criticized and maligned publicly and privately now for a number of years. Much of it fair, some of it unfair, but looking to head in a new and positive direction, and like I said, maximize 2026. Matt Crocker, welcome.
Shifting gears to MLS, we're coming off another busy weekend. One of the marquee games, Nashville, LAFC. Nashville took a 1-0 lead thanks to Hani Mukhtar. They subbed off Walker Zimmerman in the second half. Gary Smith came out afterwards and said that Walker was complaining of groin tightness. But his departure obviously made Nashville's defense more vulnerable, and Dennis Bouanga equalized. 12 goals in 12 games in all competitions for him this season. It ended 1-1, so LAFC, the only remaining unbeaten in the league, avoid their first defeat.
And Bouanga, how about Bouanga? I mean, his goal, he got that ball, he turned, he ran upfield for those that didn't watch it, and he had options, but those options might as well have just gone and sat on the bench, because there was only one thing that he was doing, and he struck it just so sweet and hard. And he basically said to everybody in the stadium, I'm shooting this, and I'm shooting this over there on the right side, and still it went exactly where it went. And that's just one of many moments now of a player who is playing with just incredible confidence, as is his team around him. And I mean, we'll talk later on about CCL, but I cannot wait to see how this team continues to evolve. But it's a good result for LAC to go into Nashville, and they just keep getting better and stronger through the year.
Seattle bounced back from that loss to Portland by beating Minnesota 1-0. Albert Rusnak with the only goal, his first of the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it was a win. It wasn't a decisive type of win from Seattle. And, that Rusnak, it's not an experiment anymore because he's a quality player and he's part of that team. But coming over from RSL and, going on in the free agency type of situation and playing in a different type of way. And so this is the type of moments that you kind of paid for and want, but they have been few and far between. I'm not saying that the Rusnak, the acquisition from Seattle, has been bad, but that he ended up getting the goal that mattered and the goal that got 3 points. You like to see that for a player that I think was much more impactful at RSL. And I'm not saying he can't be it with Seattle, but every impactful moment like it was here is another feather in his cap.
NYCFC 3-1 home win over Dallas, their second straight victory. The Pigeons move up to fourth in the East. Interestingly enough, Thales Magno is now back on the wing. Mm-hmm. Newly acquired Richie Ledesma is playing as the 10, and Santi Rodriguez has pushed up as that false 9. And the pieces are fitting nicely. This was an impressive performance and a good result.
The pieces are fitting nicely, and the reason why it's so impressive is that they're not even close to done. They are going to make changes, and they are going to have additions. And this is not just the only team we've talked. I was talking to somebody about the need for a striker, and obviously the U.S. and my kingdom for a striker up top. Well, there's teams all over the world that are looking for that striker, and NYCFC is looking for a true number 9 up top. By the way, Austin is looking for one. I mean, you could say others, and there's plenty of other teams out there, but NYCFC as a team in transition to still be able to go at home, I say home with quotes, at least in a baseball field, and to beat a good team in FC Dallas with the knowledge that you are only going to improve. That's a good direction to be going in for an NYCFC team that, while it has had success over the last couple of years, there was kind of a belief and a recognition that with all the moves and all the changes that they were less than elite.
And a reminder, the deadline is this week. We'll talk about that a lot on our next pod. How about Tom Bogert leaving MLSsoccer.com to go to The Athletic?
Big transfer
involving the transfer guru.
Exactly, the transfer guru. And what'll be interesting to see is, when you are now with this outfit, how many tips are you getting? Do the tips change? You're obviously being acquired for your skill, and he's wonderful. For those that don't know, he's written about the league for a long time, and he is incredible at getting information and scoops ultimately, and that's what they are buying, if you will, in terms of this move. And so you better hope the well doesn't dry up. As a matter of fact, that well better be deeper, and you better bring it on a consistent basis. And I think he will. He's quality.
He's also a big Knicks fan. He's excited about their playoff run, as am I, as is our director, Aaron Schechter. There's a whole Knicks brigade here.
They're in the playoffs of the NBA?
Correct.
Who are they playing?
Cleveland Cavaliers.
Oh, LeBron, right? No, LeBron's the other guy. Okay, he plays in Miami. Okay, go on.
One more game. Atlanta defeated Chicago 2-1 on FS1. Giacomacchi scored again, but then picked up a hamstring injury. Thiago Almada also had to come off. Chicago equalized late. Looked like they were going to get a point, but then 90+9, an own goal gives Atlanta the victory.
Look, they'll take it any way they can get it, and they were putting incredible pressure on at the end there. So in this world where we like to say deserved, but what ultimately is deserved, an own goal, they'll take it. But it's a concern when the guy that's been scoring consistently gets hurt, right? So that's a problem, and I don't like to see a Greek go down. And Atlanta plays Nashville, I think, next week. You can look it up because I'm going to tell a little story here. My son, who he's into soccer only only that that is my son. We've now started to do a thing where we pick every single game from the MLS weekend. So on the way to school today, we were going through all of the different games. And yes, Atlanta goes to Nashville. And so maybe on Wednesday's show, I'll tell you mine and both of our picks for the MLS weekend. And he's the one that reminded me, because we had forgotten to do it the previous week. And he's, Dad, because he just likes any opportunity to have one up on me, and certainly picking a winning team or a losing team or being right over his father is something that he loves to do. Anything else, Mosse, MLS-wise?
No, but we can transition to CCL.
Okay.
Because the semifinals get underway this week. On Tuesday, the All-Liga MX tie. We have Tigres hosting León. And then Wednesday, an all-MLS matchup. Philadelphia will host LAFC. The return legs are the following week.
Oh, and by the way, neither Philadelphia or LAFC, and I was talking about my son going over this coming weekend's games, neither of them are playing, so they'll be rested for the second leg. Okay. Okay. So say it again. Which one's Wednesday or which one's Tuesday?
Tigres León.
Okay, I got Tigres. What do you think?
I lean Tigres as well.
You take for the game or for the
to advance.
To advance out of the two games.
Right.
You lean Tigres.
Yes.
But you can be convinced, León, or no?
Yeah, I think it's pretty close.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm going Tigres. And I'm still, I think LAFC is just ultimately better than Philly in two games. So I'm going to go LAFC.
I agree.
It hurts me. I'm sure Jim Curtin will text me and scream and yell at me. Or it's not the kiss of death, it's the kiss of life when I pick against you. So I'm excited about this. I'm excited about what these two teams, I'm talking about LAFC and Philly, that know each other so well and obviously now have this, I guess it's a rivalry now, considering MLS Cup and everything that they ultimately done. And as we said during MLS Cup, the different ways in which they have come to success, but also the opportunity to win CONCACAF Champions League and in consecutive years have an MLS team win CONCACAF Champions League, and that carrot of, again, going to the Club World Cup and representing not just your team, not just MLS, but obviously CONCACAF. So I'm excited about that.
That's it.
That's it. All right, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a trip around some of the big results over there in Europe, and maybe even a look ahead. Don't go anywhere. Okay, welcome back. Let's take a trip around Europe, Mosse, shall we? Where do you want to start first?
We begin in England, where on Friday, Arsenal continued their implosion with a 3-3 home draw against last-place Southampton. I know they rallied from 3-1 down late, thanks to goals by Odegaard and Saka to at least salvage a draw. But nevertheless, this was a terrible result, and I think increases the sensation that Manchester City are going to win the Premier League.
Are you comfortable saying that, or do you believe that if we had to go to Vegas right now and you had to bet on a team to win, given where it stands right now, you would put your money on Man City?
Absolutely. The gap is 5, right? But City have played 2 fewer games, and those two teams will meet Wednesday at the Etihad.
Yes. By the time you listen to our second show of the week, that game will have happened, and that, I guess potentially that could decide it, because there's still some things that could happen, and winning out the games in hand still has to be won out. It's Man City, and they're a really good team. But I had to explain again to my son. I was talking about this with him and explained a 6-point game, and how you look at it as, well, this is both the team that you're chasing, and therefore you're stopping them from getting 3 points, but you're also adding 3 points in that chase coming up behind. And again, I think Man City right now is just very comfortable and loving this position that they are in. And I think that you're seeing a still relatively young and naive type of Arsenal in a place that that this group has never been. And it's within their sight, and that last mile is often the most difficult. And so, this was bad, because everybody said, all right, Southampton, worst team in the league. This is an automatic 3 points. And they gifted one in the first minute of the game. And you look around and say, all right, well, that was crazy. They'll get over that. And they have 89 minutes to figure it out. And they just kept doing dumb things and set pieces and this and that. It's almost as if they're scared to win it. Arsenal are scared to win the Premier League.
The third goal was extraordinary because that might have been the only time Southampton crossed the halfway line in the second half, and they earned the corner and then scored from it. I know Arsenal were missing William Saliba, but that's not an excuse for giving up 3 goals at home to Southampton.
All right, so Wednesday, what's going to happen here?
City will win that match.
Well, that was short and sweet.
Yes. Manchester City, incidentally, still chasing a treble. They did not play in the Premier League this week, and instead they played in the FA Cup. They beat Sheffield United in the semis, 3-0. Riyad Mahrez with a hat-trick, and then the following day, Manchester United defeated Brighton on penalties after a scoreless draw. So for the first time ever, the FA Cup final will be a Manchester derby.
Isn't that amazing? It's the first time ever?
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm all for it. I mean, that whole drama and story of red, blue, this side, that side, OGs, nouveau riche, all that kind of stuff is now on display. And the tides have significantly turned in terms of where Man City sits at this point relative to Manchester United. Now, Manchester United has been in worse positions, but that battle for hearts and minds that happens in a place like Man City, and because these are two now global brands, the battle extends well beyond Manchester. But I'm excited. I would watch it, simply because this is for bragging rights within that city.
I'm going to do a little ad-libbing in this segment,
Ooh, okay,
much to Sean Sullivan's chagrin.
Yeah, we know.
It sounds like Chelsea's next manager will be Mauricio Pochettino, but he would only take over in the summer, and we expect Christian Pulisic to leave, so he will never actually manage him. But nevertheless, he's emerged as the favorite there, Pochettino.
You happy with this? I mean, there are Poch fans. I mean, Ali Wagner worships at the altar of Pochettino.
Well, she does because she's a Tottenham fan.
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see how she reacts to him taking over at Chelsea.
I think that she would find it within her heart and soul because ultimately she's a romantic and she loved him for what he did and the way that he did it. And so I think that doesn't mean she's not that she's would be suddenly be a Chelsea fan, but I think she'll give him plenty of love.
I continue to say a good destination for Pulisic would be Newcastle. We had a Newcastle fan on Twitter implore us to give them some love today, and I will, because they hammered Tottenham 6-1.
Speaking of Spurs, there you go.
Yep, Alexander Isak, Joe Ellington and company putting on a show. It is now looking like Newcastle are going to finish in the top 4 and will be in the Champions League next season.
And, they've done it with smart hiring and, yes, an influx of new ownership and therefore new money, but there are plenty of players that have been around that are still contributing. And, this is kind of what you wanted, right? This is the proof of concept in terms of the new ownership and the new direction. And next year, if all goes well, playing in the Champions League, and that reemergence of this once great but always big club to a stature that I think Newcastle fans and fans alike have kind of expected and not gotten.
Warren Barton and I text after every Newcastle game.
God.
He is in dreamland right now.
He must be insufferable. My goodness. More so than normal. Good God. I love you, Warren.
In Germany, Bayern Munich continued their recent free fall. A 3-1 defeat away to Mainz. They actually took the lead through Sadio Mane and then conceded 3 unanswered goals. That's 3 defeats in 7 games for Tuchel. Nagelsmann lost 3 times in 37 games this season. And that opened the door for Dortmund, who this weekend did not falter. 4-0 home win over Eintracht Frankfurt. Malen with 2 goals. Bellingham and Hummels got the others. Gio Reyna's reward for his goal against Stuttgart was to be an unused substitute in this one. But nevertheless, Dortmund leapfrog Bayern. They are now 1 point ahead with 5 to go in Germany.
Well, so I asked you, you were comfortable saying that that Man City is going to win the EPL. Are you comfortable saying that Dortmund's going to win the Bundesliga?
No, but this is the first time where I'm definitely not comfortable saying Bayern are going to win it. Until recently, we still had this idea of, it's a race, but deep down, we all know how this story ends. I'm not so sure anymore because this coaching change has been an absolute disaster for Bayern.
And, we were talking, I think, last week on one of the pods about this performative aspect of Bayern Munich winning the Bundesliga title because they do it so much, and really it's bigger things, especially especially Champions League, UEFA Champions League. And now we're in a situation where it's one thing if you're, performance arting winning the title, but that's the very least that should be expected. If that goes away too, then you got to clean house, especially upstairs, that house upstairs with Oliver Kahn and those types of guys. Ouse.
Two more for you. Barcelona beat Atletico Madrid 1-0. Ferran Torres with the only goal. That puts La Liga completely to bed. Mm-hmm. And Napoli won 1-0 away to Juventus. Napoli can clinch the title next weekend. It'll be their first Scudetto since the Maradona-inspired triumph in 1990. Although the big news in Italy recently is that Juventus got their 15 points back on appeal. So that's turned the top four race upside down. Absolutely crazy. Now, there's another appeal that the points might get taken away again, but for now, at least, they're in there. They're third. They're battling with the likes of Roma, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Lazio, and a couple of teams are going to be left out.
And, there's major implications financially from finishing up there in the Champions League spots for Juventus. So, my goodness. But I don't think there was ever... It's Italy, so nothing's ever really resolved.
The guy who's been great on this is Mourinho. He was interviewed recently, and he said, you guys are in third place. And he goes, are you sure we're in third place? It's not Juventus? Because I've been in Italy for a long time. I know how this works. Exactly. And then sure enough, Juve got the points back, leapfrog Roma in the standings. And when Mourinho was asked about it, he said, they got the points back 3 months ago when this process started. Right? Like, I'm not stupid. Like,
right? Exactly. Yeah, he understands.
Yes.
He understands it. All right, well... Title races are good, in my expert opinion. The more of them, the better, and we certainly have it going in the EPL and Bundesliga. It's gone when it comes to Spain and when it comes to Italy, but there's still plenty.
And at least in Italy, the team that's running away with it is a great story.
Yep, it's a great story. Yep. It's really cool actually to see them and.
It's amazing. There are 5 Italian clubs left in the semifinals of the 3 competitions, and none of them is Napoli, the team that's running away with Serie A.
Yeah, but they will celebrate this, and rightfully so. I mean, I remember when I was playing back there many, many years ago, even then, it was made very clear to me by my teammates and then by the experience of going there that, yes, it is part of Italy and a proud part of Italy, but it's in the South, and they look at themselves in a very different way. I mean, you need look only, for example, to the way they treated Maradona and treat Maradona, and they're incredibly protective of what that region and obviously what Napoli is. And so the pride and the celebrations are justified, and I think are going to be off the hook.
Absolutely.
Anything else, my friend?
That's it.
All right, let's take another quick break, and when we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Okay, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that point of the show where you either ask us questions online on all the social media platforms using that hashtag Ask Alexi or Ask Mosse, but keep in mind that our social media handles out there are SOTU with Alexi. Or you can call in to our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297. That is 657-549-2297. What do we have this week, Mosse?
We have a voicemail. Let's take a listen right now.
Hello, this is Roman Lopez from Yakima, Washington. So on Ricardo Pepi with his club situation, I was wondering, would you think it would be a benefit for him to play for the U-20 U.S. team in the U-20 World Cup? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Roman. That's interesting because normally you would say that the opportunity for a young player to play in a Youth World Cup is something that you want to take advantage of because you are in the storefront window. There are plenty of teams that are looking and shopping for young talent, and that this would increase your cachet and your reputation and your credibility. I'm not sure that Pepi right now needs that. He's kind of done the club version of that, where he went out on loan, He's scoring a boatload of goals for a team that's struggling and kind of recaptured that. Now, look, does it hurt to go to a Youth World Cup and to star? No. By the way, Mosse explained to the folks he is able to represent the U.S. because of how young he is. What's the year that we are?
So to play in an under-20 World Cup, you have to be under the age of 20 on January 1st of the calendar year in which the tournament will be played. So Pepi was born January 9th, 2003. He didn't turn 20 until January 9th of this year, so he does just make the cut, so he is eligible.
Yeah, so apart from the pride and the experience of playing in a Youth World Cup, there's the individual potential that exists from having a good World Cup. And, that has to be weighed by the player. And nowadays, these are all professional players for the most part. And they have agents, they have representation, and they're strategic in picking and choosing. And so this isn't the full national team, where I think that there's also a recognition of you're representing your country at the full national team national team level. Yes, he can. To answer your question, Roman, I don't think that he needs to, and I don't know if he wants to. What do you think?
Well, first of all, the Under-20 World Cup that Roman is alluding to takes place next month. It's in Argentina now. It was originally in Indonesia, but got taken away from them. The draw occurred for that tournament this past Friday. The U.S. Was placed in a group with Ecuador, Fiji, and Slovakia. That tournament will come your way on Fox Sports. And yet, we go through this every Under-20 World Cup with the U.S. American fans, they're thirsting for some kind of global success, something outside of a CONCACAF context. And so they always talk themselves into players who, deep down, they know are probably past the point of playing in a Youth World Cup because they're already very much in the mix with the senior team. And they say, well, why don't we, quote-unquote, go for it in this Under-20 World Cup and send the absolute best possible team we can, and maybe we'll win it, and that'll be a nice feather in our cap. It tends to not go that way because these decisions are made more based on players' development, and so you'd have to convince the player that there's actually a benefit to him playing in this tournament. As you mentioned for Pepi, he might feel like he's beyond this, and he feels like he should be starting for the U.S. senior team. But we'll see. I will say, Roman, I've heard crazier suggestions than this. I don't think Pepi is like so above this level that it would be crazy. I mean, I've heard in past cycles people like Pulisic, who was already arguably the best player on the senior team, and people arguing that he should perhaps play in an Under-20 World Cup. Pepi, it's not to that extent, but nevertheless, I do think he's probably beyond that point.
Yeah, but winning a U-20 men's World Cup, right? So how does the soccer world change? Winning a full World Cup in 2026 for the men, that is monumental and who would shake the foundations of what is going on. So the reason why I think we as Americans look to these youth teams is because at times we're insecure. At times we're worried that we're not doing the right things to foster young talent. And this is ultimately where that young talent appears. And what we do is when there is success, and we've had limited over the years, but if there were to be the ultimate success of winning in this case it would be an Under-20 Men's World Cup, we would extrapolate it out and say, okay, this is what they've done at a younger age. Keep in mind that that's not always how it works. As a matter of fact, it doesn't work like that the majority of time. I mean, you can look at plenty of youth teams that and youth nations that have been really, really good, especially at the youth level. You can look at Africa also, plenty of nations that have done things at a youth level, and they haven't been able to parlay that into success of the full national team, which ultimately is the goal. And I'm not saying that I don't want to win this, and I'm not saying I don't want to take a competitive team out there, but it's not an elixir, it's not a magic bullet, even though I would love to see it happen. And there are plenty of really, really good players, I think, with or without Pepi. I think this is going to be a competitive team and one that I want to watch.
It will be interesting to see once the squad is announced how compliant MLS clubs are in releasing players, especially guys that are already key contributors for their clubs. So that's always a battle when it comes to youth level because the clubs are not obligated to release players for this tournament.
They're not, but I think in that scenario, though, the asset that these clubs have can only be enhanced by a good Youth World Cup. And when I say enhanced, what's the attraction? The attraction is that pathway and the eyes and therefore the opportunities of Europe. And when you say Europe, you mean money. And so these assets appreciate now a good World Cup, and now whatever eyes were upon them, now there's that much more. But more importantly, their price tag has just increased.
If I may put my Brazil hat on here for 1 second.
Sure. Have I ever stopped you before? Go.
The South American Under-17 Championship drew to a close this past weekend. This tournament was on Fox Sports, and if you follow Fox Soccer Twitter, they did a great job of covering it. Brazil ended up winning it, which is the only reason I brought it up. And the 4 teams that qualified for the Under-17 World Cup were Brazil, Ecuador, Argentina, and Venezuela. I don't think we know yet where that tournament is going to take place. It was supposed to be in Peru later this year, but it was stripped from them, and they haven't announced a new location, I don't believe. Ecuador, incidentally, had this phenom at this tournament, this 15-year-old kid, Kendry Paez, who's already signed with Chelsea. So he was kind of the big attraction. They were the hosts. Tournament took place in Ecuador, so there was a lot of buzz around this guy. And, yeah, he's very good. Chelsea have got themselves and listen, if Chelsea bought him, he must be good because Todd Bowley's not one to just throw money.
Of course,
around.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a sure thing, basically. Do the Brazilians look at their youth national team performances in the same way that we do? I mean, do they attach meaning or significance, either individual or collective?
No. In fact, there's been a real diminishing of youth national teams in recent years that bothers me because the Brazilian soccer calendar is insane. And so given the existence of the state championships, and it makes it where they play through all the FIFA windows, and so they invariably lose players during those FIFA windows, and they resent the national teams for that rather than looking in the mirror and feeling like it's their own fault for having this crazy calendar. And so they take it out on the youth teams because they're not obligated to release those players. They almost never do. So it's been this disturbing trend in recent years where Brazil has been not putting their best foot forward in these youth tournaments. They somehow won both the South American U-20 and U-17 championships this year, despite of that. But for example, there's a kid named Endrick who is like the latest phenom in the assembly line. He's already signed with Real Madrid. He didn't play in either the South American U-20 or U-17 championships this year. What's the point of developing a player like that if you never get to use him in an international context? So that does frustrate me.
I really feel horrible for you in Brazil. I really feel bad, my friend. Anything else, my friend?
Yes, we have a Twitter question at Lance Wagner 6. Wrexham win promotion. Very early prediction. Do they stay up or get relegated next season?
Okay, so in case you missed it, Wrexham achieved promotion, and so they go into EFL 2, if I'm not mistaken, now next year. So congratulations to the team, obviously the celebrity ownership, and everybody that is invested, either financially or emotionally in this team. So a couple of things. As those of you that have listened to this show know, I have not watched the show, and I'll be honest, I have not watched the team. But from what I've read, and I've certainly read plenty about the team, they have significantly increased their spending in an effort to gain an advantage and to increase their chances of promotion, which is exactly what happened. And so it worked. There is proof of concept in terms of what they are doing. So I suppose going into the next league, and I certainly don't know a tremendous amount about EFL 2, I would suppose if they continue along those lines and they continue to spend more money and they continue to spend it smart and they improve, because theoretically this is obviously it is a level up, but theoretically it's going to be that much more competitive, then I would think that they can be competitive in this if they continue to do what they are doing. But I don't know if they stay up. You watched the show, right? Or
I did.
Watched the show?
No, I'm all in on this story. I think it's great. So, yeah, this past weekend, Wrexham, they clinched the National League title, which means automatic promotion to League 2, which is the 4th tier. And I absolutely think it seems like those owners are still very invested. They're going to keep spending money. So I don't think they get relegated. If anything, I think they're a strong candidate to get promoted again.
You think?
Yeah.
But you think because they are just going to spend the money that it takes to hedge their bets to increase their chances?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. I will say this, though, because, when this happened, a bunch of people on Twitter were screaming and yelling at me and saying, hey, you see, this is why promotion relegation exists, and this is, and calling me names and doing all that, more so than they do normally. And I don't look at this story as, a proxy or a referendum on, the benefits and the positive nature of promotion relegation. This is just a wonderful story. This is a wonderful story about what this has done for a team that's been around for ages, a team that has not been successful, and a team that has been raised. And when I say a team, it's not just a team, it's that community, it's that it's that area, it's the people. And you saw that joy and you saw that excitement. Now, you can see people crying and you can see people emotional and you can see people celebrating and running around the streets with pride in any neck of the woods, in any city. You don't need promotion and relegation to have that happen. And all of this pride and celebration, it's not relative to promotion and relegation. It's relative to success. It's relative to a wonderful story, and a story that has been incredibly told through the use of the show, an incredibly smart and shrewd marketing component of this show to give people a connection, sometimes a connection from thousands and thousands of miles away to a team that not only they have no connection to, but they never even heard of. So credit to them. But this doesn't change any of my feelings relative to the evergreen and ongoing promotion relegation debate.
This is the only country where this is a polarizing story. Everybody else is celebrating Wrexham, what a cool thing that's happening. But if you go on Twitter and you type Wrexham, because, MLS folks are defensive because
Sure.
they view the celebration of Wrexham as, an attack on their way of doing things. So it is interesting how this is this is the only country where it is kind of a polarizing story.
Look, it's great. And as I said, I have no context when it comes to the actual show or watching this team. So it's all just seeing the news and reading the stories, and that's great. I can recognize and I can celebrate one of these stories for what it is, which is just a great story. And keep in mind, I know all about promotion relegation. I have lived it. Okay, I know exactly what people are talking about. I know exactly how it feels. I know the pressure. I know the competition. I know the environment. But you can find moments like this of celebration. You can find moments of emotion. You can find moments of, historic pride relative to sports teams that aren't involved in a league or a structure that has promotion relegation. And you can find soccer teams like that. And, had the ownership of Wrexham bought, a USL 2 team or so, a small soccer team that existed in a local community, they could have had that done in whatever, town that would have been in. They could have won the title. They could have had success. They could have, changed the way people think about that team and therefore think about their city, even without, the promotion relegation structure being around it. That's not. I don't think the two of them are ultimately tied together. It's just a wonderful story and one that I think deserves to be highlighted and deserves to be celebrated. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, I'll give you my one for the road. Okay, welcome back. It's the end of our show, and at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. A few days ago, Mosse, I was on that Twitter machine again, and someone was talking or asking me about AI. You know that AI thing, the artificial intelligence out there, and all the things that are happening, and all the computers taking over things. You've heard about this, right?
Yep.
So someone was asking me about how they think, because if it's going to take over everything, then obviously soccer is part of that. how is AI going to play a part going forward? And I certainly don't claim to be an expert when it comes to the technology and all of the capabilities, but I can read and I can see, and I've been around a while, and I have certainly lived through moments where technology that would blow people's mind has taken over and ultimately been harnessed by humans. And so when I think about the future of the game, I know sometimes in the past on this pod we've talked about rule changes and what's going to change the game. I think that whether it's the U.S. national team or any club team out there, or any national team out there, or any team in general, because it is tangible and it's there to be utilized, like any other technology, analytics and all the different things that have come into play. I think when it comes to game planning and tactics and scenarios and possibilities and scouting and all of these different things, I think it really is limitless in terms of how you can incorporate something like AI into a soccer situation. Does it ultimately get to a point where machines are making decisions that in the past humans were making? Maybe. But I think as long as we are around, and and we're still around, for when I say we, I mean humans, and I can confirm that I am one too, I think that what you're just going to see happen is more information. I don't know if it becomes information overload at a certain point, but more information that therefore enables humans to make a more informed decision. And whether it's lineups, whether it's players to sign, whether it's off the field and how to access fans, what direction to go in, marketing, all of these different things, the ability to not just do things quicker, but to do things more targeted and therefore more effective. Everybody's been looking at that forever. Will it mean that jobs will be phased out? Potentially, like in any industry as it develops and it evolves. But it also means that you're still going to have people that are going to be able to access this and understand it. And like anything, the ones that are able to interpret it the best and use it to their advantage are the ones that are going to get the benefit and have that head start against relative to everybody else. I would think that there are already very smart people within organizations that are looking at this technology going forward and are trying to theorize and then put in practice how they are going to use it. And if you're not, then you're probably not doing, if that is your job, is to figure out these things, then you're probably not doing your job. And by the time that you do figure it out, the others will have gained a significant advantage. I don't think, at least from a sporting perspective, it is necessarily something to be wary of or scared of. But, I do think that our game, I know I'm not supposed to say our game, but the game of soccer, and by the way, not just the game of soccer, but sports in general, are going to look very, very different. And I'm not just talking about 100 years down the line. I'm talking about 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line, when, hopefully we're still around. And that's, again, not anything to fear. I think it's actually something to be excited about going forward. Anything before we go, Mosse?
That's it.
You know what? Anything to say? All right, that's cool. Well, thank you for checking in with us here on the first pod of the week. Thank you for reviewing and downloading and subscribing and rating and doing all the different things that you do and have done to make this podcast a success. And it is a success, but we don't rest on our laurels. We continue on. And that's why we have opportunities for you to let us know what you're thinking. And whether it's using that hashtag out there and getting to us on social media, or whether it's calling in. And, while the State of the Union podcast hotline, again, 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. While it is oftentimes used for questions, it's also there to stir debate. And so if you have a comment or a suggestion, out there, that is certainly something that we want to hear too. But that people are accessing that makes us very, very happy. All right, we'll be back again here later on in the week with our second one, all sorts of games to talk about and things that are happening in the next couple of days, not the least of which is a big game happening over there in the EPL and CONCACAF Champions League and all sorts of stuff. But until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.